I just wanted to share a quick thought with you guys. I've been doing a lot of research, and the stuff I've been sharing about spiritual warfare and the recent stuff about you're only as sick as your secrets. And as we're moving into the practical application of spiritual warfare in terms of addressing the issues in your life and the way that your reactions change, my reactions change. Everybody's lives are affected by the attacks of the enemy. And until we start to recognize that, we attribute the problems that we have either to other people or to the fleshly stuff, the fleshly weaknesses, either the corruption because of our sin or just the natural, diseases or afflictions or whatever that can happen in our bodies. I'm going to address that stuff later. But I know if you're in the midst of this, if you're really wrestling with this and you're really asking yourself, or asking God to help you identify the enemy in your life, one of the natural questions that comes alongside that is, why me? Why would God allow these things into my life? Why would the enemy target me with these things? Why do people give in to these temptations? Why do I give in to temptations? All of us have sick parts of ourselves, and we don't always understand why. The thing that I wanted to put in front of you, if you're battling with this. So there's good news here. But there's also some stuff to wrestle with, and you're welcome to ask questions in the comments or email me if you feel like you don't get resolution from this. But when we're looking at the ugliest things that human beings do to each other, all the different forms of abuse, all the different sort of gruesome forms of violence, the ways families are torn apart, addictions and the things that people do to feed addictions, the ways that people treat each other, even if they don't know each other well, just the ways that we can be sick to each other. If you've been touched by those dramatic issues, you have a tendency to, or we have a tendency to blame the people involved and see them as sick, and then get upset with God about why did he let that into my life. Because there is truth to the fact that his power means that, and I'm sure he already does this and has already done this in your life, regardless of what has come into your life. I know and I am confident that the enemy would have done more, but God did not let him. But where that breach has occurred, where we have been violated or abused or neglected or left desperate by other people, we ask God, why? Why would you let that happen? Why is this? Why me? Why did that have to be part of my life? Why did that particular pain have to be something that I have to deal with? We say that partly because we look at people around us and it seems like quite often they're not dealing with what we're dealing with, so we feel isolated in it. But also it's a theological question. Why? How does a God who calls himself love, who says he's the embodiment of love, who says that he wants to relieve burdens and heal and give us life abundant, how does that God rationalize allowing people into our lives that would destroy us? So here's what I can tell you, because I can't tell you specifics, because that will be between you and God. Here's what I can tell you. We know that anyone who knows God is chosen by Him for good works, that there are things that you are gifted, talented, spiritually gifted, intended by God to do. There is potential in you. There's a purpose for you. There is things in your life and ways that you think and things that you're good at and just ways that you either communicate or express yourself, or however, there's something you bring to the world that nobody else brings. God made you unique. He mixed a special recipe for you. And we know, because He tells us, that He has very specific plans for you. And they're plans for good, for your own good and for others. So God's goal, this I can tell you, God's goal for you always was and always has been good. There has always been an intention in His mind for you to experience good and to be used for good in this world. That He tells all of us directly through His word. He also tells us that the enemy that we have has a very specific goal. And that enemy's goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. And we know that once we're saved, the enemy cannot kill us in a meaningful way. He cannot steal us out of God's hands. So what does that leave him? You have an enemy that has no good in him. None. There's literally no light in him. His stated goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. And where his ultimate goal, which is your spiritual destruction, the removal of your heart from God, where he can't achieve that because God has already plucked you up and you're already committed through faith in Christ. Then you have an enemy whose primary goal is to stop you from doing or saying or being anything that could lead someone else out of the pit of hell. So now his focus shifts. He can't steal your eternal salvation, but he can do everything in his power that God allows to steal your effectiveness in this world, to steal your energy, to steal your faith, to steal your anything in you that could be good. He wants to remove from you or make you doubt it so that you won't use it. He wants to convince you that you're nothing, that you have nothing to offer, that you can't be used by God, you're too bad or too broken or too dirty or too messed up. There's nothing good that can come from you. He wants to convince you that all of the promises God offers in his word were really designed for people who didn't have to struggle with the things that you struggle with. He's destroying your picture of yourself in God's hands. He's stealing your joy. He's stealing your purpose. And he's doing everything he can to kill the potential in you, because that potential will lead others to the truth. Any of us who are surrendered, who really give our lives to God and enjoy that and find delight in him, find healing, God uses us. God uses people in each other's lives. When you see somebody who is wise, who's mature in their faith, who's effective, that's not because that person is less broken than you. It really isn't. In fact, in my experience, the more broken you are, the more God can use you. Because people are broken and they can't relate to somebody who hasn't battled, who hasn't been hurt. So it's only when God himself brings victory into our lives that we can actually have a testimony that's powerful. And through that, people who otherwise would be just hot messes, just completely unable to cope with anything except their own pain, those people can only find Christ by talking to other people who were that broken and found Christ. It's only when you tell the truth about how broken you are and about what God has done through that other people find hope. Because the reality is, no matter what's happened to me in my life, there are people out there that have experienced worse, far worse, and there are people that have experienced nothing like what I've been through. That's because God made me to have a specific audience, and it was an audience that was broken in the ways I was broken. And that I can show them his victory in that. And the same is true for you. Your audience probably isn't the same as my audience. You've been violated or harmed or broke or self-destructive in ways that I haven't, and I've had those things in ways that you haven't. The point is, our hearts are designed to have a purpose. And if we understand that, and we understand that we have an enemy that fears that purpose, Satan wants nothing more than to keep me trapped in fear or doubt, because he knows he can't keep me out of heaven now. But by gosh, if he can keep me afraid of sharing my story in case people react in a way that I don't like, or in case my flaws come out and people judge me or whatever, as long as he keeps me doubting or afraid or selfishly focused, then I am not able to fulfill the potential that God created me for. And that serves Satan's purpose. The further I step into the spiritual warfare battlefield, the more I realize how massive the power is that God has given us, and that we individually, as people, frighten Satan. He has to listen to Christ. He has to do what the Spirit of God tells him to. So when we use that against him, he has no room for victory. It's only where we entertain him, only where we listen to him, and just like Eve did, entertain the thoughts that he brings about God's motives or the questions or the lack of trust. It's only where we step in line with things that contradict the word that the enemy has a foothold. But if you want to know why you, I want to reassure you that God does not take your pain lightly, and that where you are hurt, he hurts. That anywhere that he has given the enemy freedom to touch your life, he has also given you authority greater than the freedom he gave the enemy. And when you learn to see that and trust it and use it, you learn that you haven't been left vulnerable. You weren't left isolated. You weren't left unprotected. It's a bunch of questions, and it's a conversation that you need to have with God on your own. I can't bring you to a point of believing things. I can only lead you or tell you about the path he took me. But where he brought me was, ultimately, I now stand in a point in my life. I had this conversation with a couple different people this week. I stand in a point in my life now where when I look back on the worst days and the hardest events and the most painful wounds, and I think if I could go back, because it used to be for the first 28, 29 years of my life, when I looked back on those moments, I wished to go back to do them differently. I wished to make different decisions. I wished to have different events. I wished to stick up for myself better or whatever. Now, when I look back, because I've come through, we're 14 years in now from when God transformed my life, really transformed it. And when I look back on those events and those moments and those pains now, I see now, because I'm far enough down the road, I see that those were the only way for me to find what I've got now. I see where my heart was resistant, which means I wouldn't have listened without being broken. I was too prideful and I was too selfish. And I also see where it was out of my control, where it wasn't on my decisions, that the wounds that created in my life brought me to a place with God where I asked questions and wrestled with things that I otherwise wouldn't have touched. And the result of those two sort of paths through my life and through my heart were finding a relationship with God that literally fills and just gives me so much more than anything else in my life, that it's worth it. Like, I look back on those things now and I think, I couldn't do this any other way. I couldn't be here now where I am now. I could not be here if I hadn't gone through those exact issues, those exact violations, those exact pains, those exact sins. If those parts of my life hadn't happened, I wouldn't have what I've got now. So it's worth it. Like I say now, I don't want to just because it was horrible and painful. But if I had to, if they said, Amy, you got to go back, you got to start your life over again, you got to go through it all again, and this time you're going to know the difference, I would do it all again in exactly the same way. I would let God lead me or allow the enemy in those exact ways, because going that way brought me what I have now. The treasure is worth the pain. That's how intense the treasure is. That's how much you gain from God if you really let him in. And I didn't appreciate that at the time. I didn't know that when I first went to God broken, really, really broken. All I was looking for was relief from pain. That was it. Like, I didn't have any vision of the future that was a positive one. Like, literally none. But I knew that I couldn't do it that I literally had tried everything in my power to fix what was wrong with me and I couldn't do it. So I was willing to be used by God or used up or whatever he was going to do. As long as I felt better, I was willing to go through that because I was just so desperate for relief. And instead, not only did he help me feel better in the moment so that I was better able to cope with what I had to wrestle with, and not only did he then heal me so that those things didn't have a grip on me anymore, but then he used those exact things, those very difficult, painful, wounding moments. Those were what he gave me, what gave my words power. Like that's what empowered me personally and then let me be useful to other people. I had 2 conversations this week. And in one of those, I'm convinced a life was saved. It wasn't saved by me, but it was saved by him. But he used me as a signpost. He said, you've been through this. You've felt these things. Tell her about what you went through. Let her see that you understand how she felt. And let her see that I have more for her. And so I did. It was a long conversation. It was hours through a day. She's not out of the woods. There's a huge journey to walk. But she took a step with God earlier this week that she's never taken before. And anybody could have been the tool for that. This is not about me. But there is a joy and a purpose and a fulfillment that comes when God uses you in somebody else's life. Because not only is that just fulfilling in and of itself, you've helped someone, it makes you feel good. It's better to give than to receive. That's true. But on top of that, God's trusting you with something. Like the creator of the universe is trusting you with another heart. Now it's his work that does it. It's his power that changes things. But sometimes we need to eyeball somebody and know we're not alone in order to be willing to take that risk on God, who's invisible. When we get used that way, when God trusts us with somebody else's life and their pains, it's a huge blessing. I mean, a huge blessing. It's humbling. And for me now, it took some time to get here, but there's no pressure in that. I know that it's not me. I know that it's not me. It's really not. You can ask anybody who knew me 15 years ago. It's not me. But what I did get out of that was joy. What I did get out of that was a sense of purpose fulfilled. And that my heart is designed for that. My heart is created to not only have a purpose, but to fulfill a purpose. It is satisfying. It adds to my life when that happens. So when you are on this journey and you're looking at how the enemy has been allowed in, and you're asking yourself, why didn't God let me know this sooner? Why did I have to walk through that? Why did I have to endure that? How can a loving God allow that to happen? I can tell you this with certainty. At no point were you out of his attention or out of his control. At no point was something happening that he didn't have the power to deal with. At no point were you stepping around a corner that he did not foresee. So the question is, now, having come to this crossroads in the path, which way will you go? Will you continue to listen to the enemy who wants nothing but the death of you, and if not you, because that's not possible, anyone around you whose eternity isn't secure? The enemy who wants to ruin you and wants to ruin the lives of everyone around you and steal what good he can from all of you. Do you want to listen to that guy? Or do you want to listen to the guy that tells you not only how much he loves you, he demonstrates it by placing the value of your life over his own. He literally gave up his life for you. And in that, he makes you promises about what he can do and achieve through you here and now. You don't have to wait for heaven. Hear that. You don't have to wait for heaven. He can do things for you and through you here and now, no matter how dark it gets. He can have victory in your life right now. That guy cares about you. His heart is with you. He empathizes and he wants good things. And on top of just plain loving and wanting to give you good, he also intends to fulfill those corners of you that need a purpose and need a plan and need to feel useful and need to feel satisfied. He can do that. In fact, only he can do that. So as you take each step, ask the question, who do I want to listen to? Who do I want to follow? The rest of it comes out of that.